probably second only to the horse. Your saddle's going to be your most expensive purchase when you're setting yourself up for an adventure or a long ride or anything like that. Now, there's absolutely countless options out there. Western saddles, stock saddles, English saddles, GP saddles, jumping saddles, specialized saddles, ghost saddles, endurance saddles. There's tons of stuff. But the requirements for long riding are really quite specific. We need all 9 points of saddle fit ticked off perfectly. We also need the saddle to be as light as is humanly possible, and if possible, a little bit of adjustment. So for me, to answer this problem, I had to make my own saddles. I made a couple for my wife and then I had a few people asking, can you make me one? And then it just sort of snowballed, and now I'm making custom-made saddles for long riding and for endurance, flat out when I'm not long riding myself. So I make these out of carbon fiber, and they are dramatically lighter. But whether it's one of my saddles or someone else's, the most important thing is it fits the horse correctly and you get it checked, preferably by a professional saddle fitter. You need to have some idea of how to adjust it on the road. You need to be able to look at the horse, check out what's going on, and fault check yourself constantly. Because if you aren't able to adjust on the road, then, well, you're going to wear your horse out. So it's for this reason and numerous others that saddle choice is just so important. Now, I make all of mine specifically for the horse that they're going on and for the rider. So I balance the rider as neatly as possible as I can, and I take a mold of the horse's back and just mate the two up as nicely as I possibly can. Now, it is a bit different riding in one of these, and my biggest critic for pretty much the last 4 years has been Christine. And when I finally got her to ride in one, she had positive things to say.
What did you just say?
Very upright energy.
And what was that? What was the thing you said after that?
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to be that big of a difference and that good.
So you were impressed?
I am impressed.
Realistically, most people won't be riding in a custom-made saddle. The only reason I do is because after basically deciding I wanted to devote my life to long riding, I realised that I had to make something that suited my needs. Now, that's not the course of action most people are going to take. In fact, it's pretty uncommon. So let's have a talk about some more traditional saddles and the kind of thing you can pick up sort of in the Western world, and how that applies to long riding. And then we'll have a bit more of a look at some of my super flash saddles. Righto, so we'll just talk about a few different styles of saddles here. We've got English style saddle. Let's just quickly check the scales on this. And we've got 8.5 kilos. So when it comes to English saddles, there's a few really, really big problems for long riding. A saddle like this, it's got a sort of a reasonable cantle on it. You could have a bag strap coming over here and a bag behind the cantle easily enough. So you could put some reasonably good bags on that for a day ride. However, securing a roll bag to the rear, you can see there's no means to do so. So even on an English saddle, it did for whatever reason have a few little hooks on here. You're going to have the problem that roll bag is always going to be on the horse's back. So as mentioned in earlier videos, we do not put any weight outside of the saddle support area. So with an English saddle, straight away for me, that's a really big negative. At the front, we've got two little clips here for our breastplate. However, if you're wanting to secure any sort of drink bottle holders or anything over the front here, again, you're going to have that problem of you're going to be putting weight straight over the withers and you're going to be struggling to secure it, and it's always going to be wanting to work one way or the other. So for me, I'm really not a fan of English saddles. I'm not a fan of the fit. I'm not a fan of anything really. And one big problem that you'll find with long riding is English saddles are flocked. Okay, so they've got woolen flocking for the most part down through here. Now over time, that flocking will move and a saddle will need to be checked, readjusted and fixed up. Now, if you're using a second-hand saddle that may have been on another horse that had, say, a strong left shoulder, this whole side might be squashed in. It is so common to find English saddles where the flocking is uneven. And if you don't do anything about that, you're going to end up damaging your horse very quickly. So if you do have an English saddle, I would strongly recommend every year, at least every year, when you're getting your annual check from your saddle fitter, have the flocking checked. Trees can also bend in these. Just make sure the tree is not twisted, make sure the flocking is good, and be aware that if you are using one, you are going to have quite a few limitations you're not going to find with other styles of saddles. So we'll let's grab the first Western saddle I see out. Okay, so typical Western style saddle. Grab my scales out. Oop. There we go. And we are at 15.6 kilos. So that's considerably heavier. It's twice the weight of an English saddle. Now, as discussed, one of the big problems we have is if your horse can carry 100 kilos and you weigh 80, you've only got that 20 kilo window where you can add weight for the horse. Well, we've just taken 15.6 kilos of it. So that's a big problem. One thing that I will say is very good about the Western saddle is when you've got a Western saddle with a horn, you've got options to secure drink bottles. You can secure bags over the front that put the weight off the horn. By having the weight on the horn, that goes down through the saddle tree, which is good. The fact they're made of wood and leather, not so good. Now, as we know, we can't put any weight past the last rib. Often the skirt will extend past the last rib. That is perfectly fine, no problem whatsoever. And with that big thick pad, with this hard leather skirt, and with the ability to secure quite often to the cantle quite well, having a roll bag on a Western saddle is far, far, far more ethical. But the reason we don't ride in them is simply that extra weight. I mean, that's 10 kilos extra from riding in one of these, rather the light carbon saddles that we ride in. So we've got another type of saddle we should talk about, and that's the barefoot saddle here. So this is just your traditional sort of treeless saddle. A lot of people swear by these. I know of one very successful long rider who I have a great deal of respect for, and she rides with great success in one of these. And I would like to think one of the biggest reasons why she does so well is because of her just continued commitment to the ethical treatment of her horses, and a big part of that is in the amount of time she spends dismounted, walking next to the horse rather than riding it. So this comes in at 7.5 kilos, so it's not too bad. Now she carries a pack horse, has a pack horse with her, so that's carrying all of her gear. And for her, riding 15 kilometers a day, dismounted 15 kilometers a day, a saddle like this works very well. However, I don't like them. I don't like them because I can bend it, and if you can bend it, it bends on the horse's back and can potentially put uneven pressure down on the horse, which is the last thing we want to do. For a riding saddle, for something you just chuck on and go for a quick hack, I think that there's things about them I don't hate, but for me personally, I would never, ever, ever, under any circumstance whatsoever, recommend that you long ride in a treeless saddle carrying any additional weight. You need that tree to put the weight down through the saddle support area. So yeah, that's the three main types of saddles you're likely to encounter. Another thing that we've got up here, which I think's kind of cool, very light. It's basically a bareback saddle pad. We'll see what this weighs. And this is actually heavier at 3.6 kilos than a bare carbon saddle. So that gives you an idea of how light the carbon fiber saddles are and what gives them an advantage. They've got the tree, they're fitted to the saddle support area, they can carry the roll bag up, and they can secure things to the front. So whatever you choose to use, just know that everything has its pros, its cons. Sitting on carbon saddle with just a sheepskin over it Obviously it's not going to be as comfortable as a nicely padded English or barefoot saddle, but that weight, if you've got that 20 kilos that you can use, and if you're chewing up 14 with a saddle or 8 with a saddle, it righto. So you can see that this weighs just under 5.5 kilos. This is one of my saddles. I don't want this to be like a promotional video or anything like that. The reason these saddles came into existence is because basically there was nothing there that did what I wanted a saddle to do. Now, you might notice this has got 2 mohair girths that it was just weighed with, as well as the stirrups and as well as the breastplate. So given that the English saddle was 8 kilos and didn't have a girth or stirrups or anything like that, you can see just how light these saddles actually are. So I've gone for a carbon fiber saddle. I make them myself. It took 3 years to learn how to make the saddles properly, but they're working beautifully for me. And another thing is that was weighed with bear spray and sunscreen. So there's 0.5 kilo. And then I've got the med kit here as well, with asthma puffer, tourniquet, Israeli bandage, pocket knife, that kind of stuff. And there's even beer openers and everything on this saddle. So you can see how incredibly light they are. And I just use the Compassy Reflex stirrups. These are really light, and I just add my own cages to them with biothane leathers and all of that. So yeah, the reason I made these saddles was I couldn't find what I wanted in an existing saddle. Prior to this, I rode in an Australian stock saddle, and as good as the Australian stock saddle was, it was 11 kilos, and a big problem with English saddles, Western saddles, Aussie stock saddles, all of that kind of thing is the trees can actually bend, and if you're always hanging off the horn or hanging off the cantle, you can twist the tree, which is not great. English and Aussie stock are both flocked saddles. They have woolen flocking, and over time that can move, that can change, and all of that stuff I'm not a fan of. So what I've got on underneath my saddles is the ability to shim them on a tree that doesn't move. So I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. So I can just shim them with anything. I've just shimmed this with a beer cooler. And I can change the shape of the fit on the horse's back on the road as they gain and lose muscle. Now the reason why doing shimming is much better than say having a saddle with an adjustable gullet or adjustable width and things like that where you screw with the Allen key. Those things can move over time, just like a tree can bend and all of that. Your carbon won't. And if you're using a riser pad or anything like that, you'll never ever get the riser pad in the exact same spot as it was before. Where with shims on a saddle, they stay where they're supposed to. So yeah, I've also got the platform at the back here, so I can carry a roll bag to balance out any weight I put on the front, but I can also keep that up and off the lumbar region of the horse. So yeah, so I love saddles like this, but whatever you choose to ride in, the most important thing is it fits the horse. So as I've said before, and I'll say again, the most important thing in a saddle is having a saddle that fits your horse, whether that's an English saddle, a specialized saddle, which I think are really good, by the way, one of these new Ghost saddles, they're not too bad, Aussie stock, which are great but heavy, Western, which are great but heavy. The best saddle for your horse is one that fits it. So I'll show you how tough these things are, and then I'll show you how I fit one of these to one of our horses. Sometimes when I'm drinking, I like to harrow my fields, but I can never seem to attach the harrow properly, so I'm using my saddle. So one of the main questions I'm asked about my saddles is, Pete, can I use them for fishing? Well, let's find out. Righto, you filming? Okay, so just quickly go over our saddle setup for 2024. We've changed a few things around on both horses this year, mainly because we just try and keep improving everything. If you're not going forwards, you're standing still, and we don't want to do that. So Marengo has basically got pretty much the same saddle as last year. There's 9 points of saddle fit that we look at, and this for him ticks absolutely all of them. First thing is, he's a very short horse. He's only got a 38 centimeter saddle support area. So you can see from the line here where the fur meets, that's a good indication of where his last rib is. So you can see it's a very short saddle. We've got perfect full panel contact the whole way through. The balance of the saddle is just right. So I'm basically sitting in the quietest part of his back. It's got a very wide channel that clears his spine. At the front here, we've got huge clearance over the withers. Okay. So at the front here, huge clearance over the withers, but most importantly, it's got great clearance on the sides of the withers, so I can stick a couple of fingers down there. But this is the thing that's really important for us as long riders, is the fact that I can stick my hand right down the side here. So what this means is both of his shoulders are free, so he is able to make any dynamic movement, and yeah, there's no damage to the cartilage on the top here. Now, quite a few people have commented, you know, like when they've thrown the horse on, their horse is played up. The horse actually isn't playing up, it's just free for the first time, and it's just having fun. So you'll notice a lot more shoulder movement riding in one of these, and yeah, honestly, they are really different. And if you've got a hot horse, he's just gonna be fun. So another thing is the girths. A lot of people comment on the two girths we have. I've had people say things like, oh, it stops the horse breathing and all that kind of stuff. Well, no, the horse's lungs are under its ribs. They're not back here. Now, you'll see this girth is done up just as tight as the front girth. Now, the reason for that is it pins the saddle down. It has full panel contact the whole way through. The saddle doesn't slide backwards and forwards. And people say things like, oh, my horse is girthy, he'll act up, he won't like the second girth. No, there's no problem with the second girth. The problem is with you. If you're nervous putting the second girth on, if you think your horse will act up, your horse is going to act up. So yeah, so we use mohair here. We're using sheepskin as our rugs. We find it just provides the best, what I call a dynamic surface between the saddle and the horse's back. Obviously he moves around a lot, and the sheepskin's got just enough squish in it that he's got a nice even support surface with just that right little, you know, so he can move and he's evenly distributing his weight. So yeah, so this saddle's really light. All up, everything that's on him, including 2 beers, is about 6 kilos, and that includes his bridle. So from here, we'll put the bags on and a few other things, and we'll go riding. So that's just a quick rundown, very short video of the saddles that we're riding in this year for our long ride.
Righto, so I'll sum it up and I'll say it again. The best saddle you can use is one that fits both you and the horse. Brand doesn't matter, lighter is better, and it's got to be able to do what you ask of it. And if you're asking it to carry a bag on the back and keep it off the lumbar, not a lot of saddles that can do that. If you're wanting it to be adjustable with shims and things like that, there's some really good ones out there like Specialized and things like that. And you know, they've got their limitations and they've got their strengths. But it is always going to be a case of, unless you make yourself exactly what you want or order exactly what you want, it's always going to be a bit of compromise. But yeah, saddle fit. Saddle fit, it's always the most important thing. Saddle fit, balance, and having an ethical weight on the horse. Just again and again and again. If you're doing those things, you're not doing wrong. And how you're doing those things, it doesn't really matter.